Blackboard Champions podcast. I am Kim Tuttle. I teach AP Language and Composition in North Carolina, and I'm joined today with Lauren Jewett. She's an elementary school specialist in Louisiana. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thanks for having me on this podcast.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about some pretty interesting topics that relate to not only our communities, but to our country, but also to the world of education. And to look back onto the national board process and how wonderful it has been for both of us. But before we begin, I want to start with a question for you. What is something that you have learned about yourself as an individual or as a teacher during this entire COVID procedures? Because one of the things that I've learned about myself is that I cannot do it all by myself. I've tried my hardest to be at home and helping my daughters with their school, cook dinner, teach in the process. And I've learned that I can't do it because I have burned meals in the middle of class. I had to wave the fire out of my kitchen. I have my dogs barking at the doors. I can't handle my dogs. And I've learned and I've said to myself, Kim, you can't do it all. You need to rely on others. So what is something that you have learned during this pandemic where you've been quarantined in your home?
I feel like it's a little similar to what you said in that we do a lot of things as teachers, and because we were forced to stop and take a step back and assess everything that we actually do, like you were saying, you had to balance all these things because there was this blurring of home and work. Now that I'm back kind of in a building and doing the things I do as a teacher, but not full throttle because everything looks different, I feel that I had to take a step back and look at everything I was doing, and that maybe it was too much. Maybe what I was normally used to doing was actually not normal. And so just being okay with, working for a little bit of time and then stopping at a stopping point and then just resting, because I know I want to keep my health intact. I want to keep my energy intact because this is a different kind of year. So just really having grace with myself as a teacher and knowing that we do a lot of things, and some of the things that we're asked to do, we do it because of our students, but it's a lot. And so I just realized to just appreciate and not take for granted all the things that I was doing, I was able to do, but appreciate that there is some time to also, you have to kind of just balance and breathe. So yeah, I appreciate everything I was able to do, but I also appreciate now that I can still get things done, but in less time. I have to be a lot more smart about it.
Yeah, I love how you said grace, because that there's grace and mercy have become my mantra. Because I know my mom and my grandmother always taught me about the power of grace and mercy when it comes to faith, but I see grace and mercy also come and be reflected in the classroom, and me as a teacher, that we need to practice that grace and mercy with our kids, because we're all experiencing this for the first time. And it's that age-old saying of we're building that airplane while we are flying it. And everything is new for the teachers, is new for the students. And I also think we need to practice grace and mercy for our school board community, because they've never experienced this as well. And they're trying to lead this entire educational community to make sure our students and our teachers are safe. So I love that you said grace, because I'm a true component of that grace and mercy. Definitely need it during this time period. During this entire pandemic, two words have been coming up. And when you watch the news and you listen about what's going on in our schools, and is equity versus equality, right? So when it comes to equity and versus equality, I know we've all seen that age-old picture of the little kids on, standing on the boxes, looking over the fence, trying to look at the baseball game. But now we are truly seeing equity versus equality and how there's a lack of equity amongst our schools. But the thing is, what I've noticed in my region is that this equity there's been a lack of equity prior, even before COVID. So it happened before COVID. It's just not COVID has shine a light on what we are missing with the lack of resources in our schools, the lack of technology within our communities. And when in my district, we still have about 16,000 students without technology, and we have about 150,000 students in our school district. So that is huge. So what have you seen being reflected within your region about the lack of resources, or do you all have a lot of resources for your students? Are they provided with all the one-on-one?
Yeah, I mean, we weren't entirely one-to-one when we went off in the spring. Sometimes we have maybe, I don't know, almost 30 kids in a class, and maybe there was like 20 and 25 devices. But sometimes computer cards were shared. So it wasn't exactly one-to-one. Now, when the pandemic hit, the school district ordered additional Chromebooks, additional hotspots, but those took a while to come in. And so by the time they came in, it was already a month had passed. So it wasn't for like lack of initiative or trying, but I think it's not just, I mean, equity to me is not just giving a kid a computer or giving a kid a hotspot, because you need to also be equipping kids with the skills to be able to use the technology and use it wisely, and then also like just be able to like log on. Teachers in the spring and even now in the fall, we were just doing a lot of tech support, like with families and with kids, especially younger kids who may have not had a lot of practice logging on to all these different, it wasn't just what we were doing in school. When we were in school, we would log on to like a couple programs, but then we added all these new learning management systems. What is it, Google Classroom or Canvas or Nearpod? And these were just things that kids didn't have an adult side by side with them. I'm talking about the teacher, like, how to like actually use these. So it was a lot of, like you said, building the plane as we fly it, the trial and error of everything. And so we just finished our first quarter of the school year last week, and it feels weird. It feels like the momentum has just been like really jagged, because it's like we're trying to do all the content as we normally would, but within all these platforms that you have to kind of get comfortable with and learn. And so teachers are trying to get comfortable with it and then relay that to parents and relay that to kids. And so I think it's an equity issue in terms of like training for teachers. And it's equity issue of how do we embed technology literacy into schools. And then as a special ed teacher, I have thought deeply, like for the last several months, about how, like, when we choose different platforms or we choose different tools and technology, how is that helping all the kids that like learn and think differently? Because technology can be really great for our students that have IEPs, students that have disabilities, but we again have to train the teachers as to how that helps everybody, like putting captions on a video, or like, providing different modes, universally designing all of the materials that we're putting on a digital platform. And there were gaps with that in a physical classroom. So then I've been bringing those conversations up, but I also am mindful of not to like overwhelm my colleagues about it, because everybody's overwhelmed with everything that's coming down the pipeline. And so, but I just get really worried about the students I serve and them getting left behind, because we're not thinking about the access of how we're providing the instruction to them. And it's been very difficult to do accommodations, over the internet for tests, like for my distance kids. Now that kids are back in person with me, it's a lot easier, but it's still hard because I have to keep my distance from them. I
Right.
can't read over their shoulder, or can't like, it's different even in person. So yeah, the equity issues for our students with disabilities, our students who are English language learners, like these issues were things I was talking about pre-March 13th before our school buildings closed. I think it just became that much more apparent because the number of articles and podcasts and everything I've seen on social media has been talking about this, but these are not new issues. The people who have worked with students in those buckets, in those groups, they know that that's been things that haven't, like needs that haven't been serviced. So it's nice that it's being brought to the forefront, but like you need resources to be able to do those things. And this is now like also a time when I feel like schools are losing resources or losing, like getting budget cuts. Like some school districts were cutting positions. I have the most kids on my caseload that I've ever had. And the amount of paperwork that we have to do because of COVID is it's significant. So yeah.
I believe it, because I know I see the IEPs are coming through from within my class, and the accommodations, and this, the separate setting, like, well, we're already in separate setting. Well, what about the extended time? And I think one of the positive things, I know people say Canvas is the new bad word for a lot of teachers and families. But for me, that's where I have found a love for Canvas that I never enjoyed. I never enjoyed Canvas before, I guess because I didn't understand the nuances of it. But for my students who do need the extended time, I'm able to quickly give them the extended time just to them, and I can target and I can see them, I can watch their progress on the assessments. But like you said, that was my number one concern, especially within my area, is for the high number of English language learners that we have in our community. It is huge. And so they're at home and they are struggling. We have a lot of students who are struggling, and we do have a school bus that goes by within the communities and brings the hotspot to them, but that's only temporary. There's not someone there who work with the students who are struggling. And because of that, they are going to be behind. But I think as what we need to kind of take that big swallow, and it's a hard pill to swallow, is that I think across the board, across the country, we're all really, is across the world, we're going to be a little behind in that teaching. We cannot teach the way we've always been teaching. And that's one of the hardest things for, I think, a lot of teachers, is to kind of reflect on that whole process, that how you once taught in the classroom, you cannot teach that way now because of the lack of resources that our students have. And they need those body cues to learn. And I mean, our students need that human contact to understand the content a little bit more. And one of the things I've seen a lot of school districts start to implement is the social emotional learning process. That has been a huge increase in impact for our area, because the students don't mind going to school, I guess you could say, because they have time to just talk to their peers. And even like we have our counselor our intern, who has a lunch and learn session where the kids in our school just come and have lunch and sit and talk with me for a little bit. So are you all implementing a lot of social emotional learning within your area?
I'm a big proponent of the social emotional learning, and I knew that once we got back in buildings that kids would be, because a lot of even the first week or two we were out of school, we were making phone calls to families and trying to check in with them. And then eventually our check-ins moved to also asking families about, did they complete assignments? And that was never the first question that I asked families. I always asked are you all sleeping? Like, are you getting the meals? Are you picking up the meals that the school's providing? Like, those were things that were like central to me. I said, is anybody in your family like sick? Like, because I had a lot of students who like either had sick family members or like dealt with deaths in the family. And so like knowing that from checking in with families, I felt like when we came back to school, knowing that school was going to look different, and also maybe not knowing certain things that families went through, that, you know, a lot of the kids and even the adults were going to need some special kind of care. And so I have noticed in terms of the way, you know, our leadership at our school has been, and then, you know, us with the kids, we haven't, it's felt a little bit more, I'm not going to say chill or relaxed, but it has felt a little bit more nurturing. Not that we weren't doing that before, but I think there was such a like pressure, like to cover so much material in a lesson, because, you know, we had this test at the end of the year, which I think we still have state testing. I really don't know. Like, I mean, everything changes every week with information, but our day is a little bit shorter right now with in-person. And I noticed that my students are not as irritable because we used to go to school 7:30 to like 4. And now kids start arriving at 8 and we end at like 2:30 or 3 o'clock, which is more of a normal length day. And the kids don't seem as tired. They just seem a little bit more, you know, just more energetic. You know, it's not like I'm always trying to pull them to, like, you know, the engagement looks different right now because of COVID, but the engagement is not as difficult because, again, they have time to go out in the afternoon and play. They're not on a bus ride for an hour when they go home. And I would, you know, somebody had mentioned to me, like, in my school community, like, what would be the rationale for ever trying to go back to the day length that we had, because it wasn't actually helping kids. Like, that's a long day. You know, I'm in a pre-K through 8th grade building, and the hours are the same for the pre-K through 8th graders. And developmentally, that just doesn't seem appropriate. I get it, given like the way that you know, we're all decentralized. And so like our buses, like that's like our buses for our school, like for our network, you know, and I understand that, but that's not serving kids. And that's not like, I also feel better as an adult because I can drive home and it's still light out.
Still light.
I'm not leaving. I get done at 3 and I can stay till 4 and then leave and it's still light out, and it just makes my mood better. So when I think about social emotional wellness of like the school, it's the kids, it's the adults. I don't really see right now like we don't have like a specific curriculum or anything that we're doing per se, but in terms of just the staggered start to the day, because we spend an hour in the morning just getting kids in the building, taking temperatures, making sure they have their masks, like asking if they had any symptoms. So I do that for our kids that get dropped off in cars in the morning. I just like that staggered like arrival and dismissal actually seems to facilitate like an easing into the day, whereas like it always felt so much more rushed. And, you know, back to the point I was talking about earlier, is just like, you know, taking time, giving yourself grace. Everything takes more time now. So as long as like people are all operating with that understanding that we're doing the best we can and we have to do this to make sure everyone's safe. Like if we want to come back in person, we have to be safe. Well, that takes more time. So I think that understanding that, I just see in some schools, and I felt this a little bit too, is that I can't get everything, the same amount of stuff done in a day because the day is shorter.
Yep.
And then I have extra responsibilities. Like my morning arrival post is taking temperatures, and that takes a long time. So just knowing everything takes more time. Going to the grocery store took more time. You know, all these things take more time. And we're in a society that's so built on like
rush,
productivity, and like get this done. And like that's not serving most people. Like that doesn't serve us very well, because at some point you're gonna crash. And like, so I've actually enjoyed some of the easing of things. It's just helped
Yeah.
me keep things in perspective.
Yeah, because that has been like, I'll say one of the best things that my district implemented is that, and it's hard for me as a high school teacher, especially in the AP class, that we had 90 minutes, so we could get a lot done in 90 minutes. And they said, well, we need to think about our students, and we need to also think about you all. So the max you can go is 45 to 50 minutes in a class, and the rest, you have to come off. The kids have to come off the internet, off the computer, and then you can have them do some writing assignments outside of that one-on-one instruction. And that has, like you talking about productivity, I've seen kids beat me onto my Zoom because they know, well, Miss Tuttle's only going to run maybe 40, 45 minutes, and then I'm done. And they're more apt to come to class, and they're ready to participate because, hey, if we get through this, I can now breathe and I can come off the computer. And I think that has been a huge boost in the morale for the teachers and for the students. And we have a scripted, social emotional learning time, and they created a curriculum for us. But the thing is, like, what I love about my principal is that we're already doing this before COVID. And so it was an easy process. So it didn't seem like a canned lesson for our students. They're like, oh, well, this is all, we're just talking about life in general. And I think that's one of the things that you will be able to see the greatest gains in the classroom and for our community is when you stop and have that relationship with our students and with our teachers. So on to the next idea and topic that we want to talk about is the presidential debate. And we can also talk about the vice presidential debate. So in looking at the presidential debate, and I sat there with my two daughters and I made them watch the entire 90 minutes for the presidential debate and the vice presidential debate, because I wanted them to be aware of what's going on in our country. And right after the presidential debate, of course, I was on Facebook and I was looking at the comments and everything that people were saying. And there were a lot of teachers saying, if that moderator would have been a teacher, how differently things would have been. Or, the little memes of, well, did they write their essential question on the board, and do they have their objectives on the board, because it looks like their lesson did not go as planned. So there were a lot of laughter and a little humor to the presidential debate, but it was also a time for us to reflect and say, something has got to be done. There needs to be a change in what our children are seeing, are adults that are not acting like adults. So I looked at the presidential debate as, ooh, this is a great lesson for my logical fallacy debate with my AP kids. This is going to be great because there's slippery slope, there's ad hominem, there's Proctor Hoc. So I could see it all in straw man and red herring. But as a teacher and for elementary and middle school, my question to you is, how can we use the presidential debate as a form of a lesson or a learning tool within our classrooms? What can we do with kids who are seeing this, and your kids are in person, and I know you have this, the special education, but is there something that you did within your class that were able to talk to your students about, or just maybe advice that you have for other teachers of ways in which they can use this as a good teaching tool?
Yeah, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I did watch both debates. So we didn't talk a ton about it in my class, only because I think the day after both of those debates, I was doing some diagnostic assessments with my students to figure out where they were coming in at with being away from the building. But a lot of times students will bring up kind of comments about the candidates or the politicians that they don't like, maybe because that's something they heard their parents say, or also because of like just in general the things that they have critically thought about themselves. And I never try to tell kids what my thoughts are, because I try to make sure I have a boundary about that. But I try to give them, facts, right? And I think fact and opinion is probably a good place to start in elementary, about what are things that are facts, what are things that are opinions, how do people converse in dialogue? Because I work with in special education, we also, I work with the speech therapist, and like one of the areas of speech is like, right, conversation, turn taking, pragmatics, like the way that we socially have conversations with each other, and just facial expressions, right? Like just looking at just taking like still shots of the debate, and thinking of, here is a picture of someone's face. What do you think they're thinking? What are their feelings? Like tying it into social emotional learning, because we can communicate a lot just by our faces and our body language. So I think that there are like avenues and opportunities there. Other things that I've heard teachers that I know have done before too is how do you get kids civically involved, or like more civically minded, even at a younger age. And because, registration deadlines to vote, I know like some teachers in elementary have talked about what it means to register to vote, what that process historically has, the battle to get the right to vote, and then assigned that as an assignment to kids, is like, here's a registration form, take this home and like make sure you're registered to vote and bring it back. So because our kids aren't old enough to vote, but just helping them understand what it means that people like really struggled to fight to get the right to vote, and that it means something, because I think some people feel like it doesn't mean anything anymore. And then talking about, right now we have a lot of local elections and state elections on our ballot in Louisiana. And so kids are probably seeing a lot of signs, right, on the bus. Like they're probably seeing people's different signs as they drive down in the neighborhoods. And so, there's lots of like ways to get kids involved in those sorts of things and in their neighborhood, because I think local elections actually make a big difference. And our school board elections are always the same year as the presidential election. So I think just seeing where there's opportunities for kids to get involved, and seeing like in a local election has a way more direct impact on teachers. And I think, it has to start, right? Some teachers are so busy that they don't even know, other than the presidential election, that other elections are going on. And I try to stay involved in the politics of what's going on, because I know that impacts whatever is going on in the state house or in like the school board. Like I know that impacts me in my classroom. And so I think teachers, even though we're busy and we have a lot going on, finding different ways to stay informed. I try to provide information to my colleagues about that, just because we get busy, and sometimes the busyness is a way to also keep us from exercising our voices. So I try to use that education tool too with my students and colleagues.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I saw of this with all the debates, is that people were saying that to be a wise voter, you have to listen to both sides. You cannot just be with one party, because you need to understand where the other party is coming from. And I think that is so true, not only with just party, but also to help with the division that we see happening right now within our entire country. That to be a good, let's go back to teaching tools, to be a good listener, You have to listen to what the other person is saying and before you make a judgment on others. And I think those age-old tools that we are taught early on in elementary school about listen to the other person, make that eye contact, be respectful. Those are those genuine tools that we need to bring back in, because the adults are the ones right now who are not setting a good example. And I would say just for everybody, it's no matter what party you're part of, we as the adults must set the examples for our kids. Because when I hear children, when I'm out at the grocery store, out at Target, and I hear them say certain things, they don't know about what's going on. They're just hearing it and they're just regurgitating it from what mom and dad have said. And my thing, it makes me sad because that's a child, and I want the child to be able to know, well, honey, do you know about both sides? And stop listening to what mom and dad are saying about that political party. Do your own research, learn about it. And I think that's one of the things that my youngest daughter's history teacher made them do, is to learn about both parties. And he is making them vote, and they're going to have an election in their classroom, and they have to understand about the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, but how the Republican Party used to be the Democratic Party and how they switched, and how the parties will play on each other. So that's really interesting. All right, so now let's talk about something really fun and really great, and it's being an NBCT, right? So here's my little scenario to you. Years and years ago, when I first heard about National Board Certified Teacher, I said to myself, who would want to do all that work? You've got to be kidding me. I just finished college. I'm not going to go back and I'm not going to do all this work. Why would I want to do that? But then an older, and I'll say a veteran teacher said, but Kim, you get a bonus every month in this district. And I was like, oh, well, so that made me think about it again. So my why to becoming a National Board Certified Teacher initially said to myself as a teacher, financial gain. But as I went through the process, it changed. It changed for me because my why to become a National Board Certified Teacher became one that said, Kim, you were doing this, so continue doing this, but it's making you become a reflective practitioner. It's making you look back on the students that you are serving to make sure that you're providing them exactly what they need and to move them to higher standards. It's forcing me to really look at the lessons that I am implementing and making sure that there is a true connection between real world situations, and it's making me reflect on who I was as an educator. So let me ask you, Lauren, what was your why to stepping into the National Board Certified Teacher journey?
I have been looking into it. My assistant principal at the time and my coach, she was a National Board Certified Teacher. And so I was thinking about doing a graduate degree or National Board. And she encouraged me to do National Board. She said it was a really phenomenal experience. And she said, you can always go get a master's, which I guess you can always go do National Board. But she just said, National Board is it's looked at so much more highly. She's like, lots of people have master's degrees, but not everybody is an NBCT. And so, I looked more into the process, and I really wanted to, I got an alternate certification as a teacher, like to start out when I was an educator, and I don't know, I just maybe never felt like I was like maybe legitimate. So I wanted to go through the process and like get more training and know more about the content area that I was teaching. I had taught for about 5 years when I started the process. So, I knew some things, but I think with teaching, you always are learning more. It makes you a good teacher. And so, yeah, I wanted to go through the process because I wanted to learn more about the students I was serving, like really dive deep into my own knowledge or lack of knowledge, and get better. And I when I went through the process, like I said, my direct coach, she had done the process, but I couldn't find anybody at the time who wanted to go through the process with me at my school or in my district. And I work in a charter school, and in my state, you don't have to be certified to teach in a charter school. So it was a little bit, some people didn't really see the, I guess maybe benefit of national board, and maybe like the enthusiasm or interest in national board had not been, had maybe been waning a little bit. I don't really know, but I couldn't find anybody at the time who wanted to go through the process with me. So I read through the things. I'm like, okay, I registered. I started the process when they revised the standards. So I was in that first group under the new standards. I started in like 2014, 2015, and then I certified in 2017. So when I went through the process, I did it all by myself. I didn't have a network. I didn't know what I was doing. I called 1-800-22-TEACH a lot. And yeah, I mean, I just wanted to know more and be a better teacher, because I felt like, I got some tools and like resources in my alternate program, but like not enough. It was just not enough, like not enough for what I needed to be doing. And so I think, yeah, just to be, I just feel like, certification, especially national board certification, I just think it shows a professionalism, it shows a commitment, that you're investing in yourself to also like be better for other people. And so like that was my rationale for getting it, my justification. We used to give a stipend through our state, and now it's like a district. It's kind of like if districts choose to give it to you, they do. Some districts don't, some districts do. So I went through it knowing I might not get any financial benefit back from it, but I knew that I would get other benefits, like the reflection and being a better educator. And like it, I would say going through the process was not as bad as like the after, like, because after I got it, then I got it and I was like, okay, yay, I got it. And then like it wasn't, nobody understood what it meant. Like I kind of like didn't know where to go from there. But I got connected with some people in my state and like that. And then I got connected with national board nationally. But I would say going through the process was not as bad as like finally getting certified, because it felt a little anticlimactic. Like I was excited, but other people were like, didn't maybe know what it meant. So it was a little interesting, because it's a lot. I mean, it's a ton of work. I knew how much work it was. I don't think other people understood the totality of all of it.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
It's competitive in my area, like in my district. Like if you are not a national board certified teacher, why are you not? I mean, that's how it has become. And I think that's why it's a large amount of NBCTs in North Carolina, but in my district, there's a huge number. And if you're not a national board certified teacher, then you need to really reflect on why you are not that teacher. And that's one of the things where I'm going to date myself, right? So you came in under the new goals and objectives. I came in which I had to apply, and then they mailed a box home to me.
Yes.
And all of the materials were in a box. And in that box, then at the very end of my process, I had to mail everything in different envelopes and then time stamp it and then put it in the mailbox by a certain time and send it away. So it was back in 2010, 2009. No, 2000, it was 2010. But I thankfully, when I decided to do this, it was my best friend and I, we said, let's do it. And we did it because of a few reasons. Yes, we did it because of the pay, and we had families, but also there were not a lot of minority teachers in our district who were national board certified teachers. There were not a lot of teachers that looked like us. And so we said, we're going to do it. And people tried to say, oh, well, when you do it, you're not, majority of people don't pass on the first go round. And Deanna and I said, well, we're not most people. We're going to pass that first go round. And so the two of us met religiously at the library on Saturdays. We were at Panera Bread, and we were looking at each other's papers. And although we were both English teachers, but it was good to the fact that we were both, she taught 12th grade, I was 10th grade at that time, but we had totally different journeys that we were going on to make us who we were as teachers. And so I'm thankful that I had Deanna with me by my side, because I know I could not have done it without her. And I could not have done it without, we have on Saturdays called, we have sessions with my district, and my district meets with us on Saturdays, and like every other Saturday during the months, to make sure that we are doing what we're doing. And we have readers who will read over our papers to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. But one of the things I love about the NBCT readers was the fact that, I wanted like definite answers about my paper. Well, tell me, I want to make sure it's the best. But they never gave you answers. It was just questions to make you go back and reflect. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to think about that. But I want the answer. So I was right back in a student's shoes as a learner and writing a paper. And so it was hard as an English teacher. That was hard. But I will say, that's one of the blessings, that if having that camaraderie going through that process, it was my saving grace. And watching my husband, he's an NBCT as well. And so he did it a few years before, and he did it in physics, God bless, and in science. And so therefore, he had his own journey, and I would also rely on him and what he do. So once I finally, Deanna and I we sat on the computer side by side, and we went online and we checked our scores, and that we both got the congratulations. We screamed, and our students were like, what's wrong with y'all? What happened? I'm like, but we're NBCTs. We made it. It was a big thing. And it was great. It felt good to be at the ceremony. And I just renewed. And I renewed 1 year early because in case I didn't make it, I renewed in 2019. And so I was like, okay, I'm done. And then my husband was like, honey, we got to get these kids out of college. You need to renew one more time. I'm like, no, no, I got to do this all again. And I felt, the renewal process is hard work as well. But it's also, once again, it makes you reflect on, have I been providing my students with the right tools all the way through? And it goes back to my principal's philosophy of, even on my best days, my worst days, would I want my own child in my classroom? And that is like, as a true NBCT, it makes you reflect of, am I providing my students with the best of me every single day? So yes. So what else? So if I have to ask you, like, if you could say one word about being an NBCT, what would that be? Or if you have more than one word, but what is something that comes to your mind when you think about yourself being an NBCT?
kind of a couple words, but I would say like life changing or career changing, because I don't think I would have had the type of opportunities um, that I've been able to have over the last few years if I was not an NBCT. And that's not to say that teachers that aren't NBCTs can't have that, but we have this, people know we put in this like level of thought and care and work, and then just, you know, I want to keep being better. I think that's like part of what being an NBCT is like we don't just like get it and then we're like done. We just keep going. And so I think that, and I think advocacy. I think that I've been able to be a better advocate for my students and for the profession because of being an NBCT. So definitely those two. And then like with going through the process, you know, you were lucky to have a friend and have those district, you know, support where people were reading. And I do that now. Like I do that now for candidates at my school and in my area. And yeah, I don't tell them what they can do. You can't do that. That's not, you know, you got to make sure you maintain the integrity of the process. So yeah, I ask them a lot of questions. Why? How did you know? What made you do this? And sometimes that can be frustrating for the like NBC, like the candidate, because they're like, I just want to know, like, what do I need to do? And you know, you need to reflect on it. So yeah, and just yeah, you have to stay organized. You have to stay organized, or get someone's gonna help you be organized, because there are a lot of parts to the questions. There's a lot of parts to all the components, and you have to be organized. You gotta, and you're gonna have to put in some work. I went to the library too. I missed many of Mardi Gras parades because I went to the library to finish working on my writing.
And you know what? And invest in a highlighter, like when you go and you look and you print off all the stuff. Because I'm, you know, when I was renewing the new, everything's online digitally, and you could read the stuff. No, no, no. I had to print off every single solitary paper because I needed it in my hands.
Uh-huh.
And so I had to highlight the key questions to make sure, did I hit the key questions? And did I do this? So highlighter is definitely a good friend. And I love the word you used was commitment. Because I think of like commitment to excellence. And that is, I'm committing to myself for excellence, but I'm also committing to my students so that they perform at the key excellence of it all. So what advice would you give to someone out there saying, I don't know if I want to do this? Because there are so many teachers who do not, and I know I talk to many of the new teachers and say, when you hit that year mark, start thinking about it, whether you take one component at a time or you do it all at once is well worth it. Because if you think about the national board process, and somebody said it best, I can't remember who, but they said, you know, starting the national board process is like saying, you know, when is the right time to have a kid? There's never a right time. You just do it, because you learn about the whole process as you do it. You learn about being a parent as you go along, and you're learning about being a better teacher as you're doing the national board process. So what is some advice that you would give to somebody out there saying, I don't know if I want to start this?
I mean, I would have them go on the website. I would have them look at all the materials, because everything is available. Like they can go and look at their national board standards. They can look at the what teachers should know and be able to do. It's a small little booklet. They can look at all the components and see what is expected of them, you know, and see how they want to space that out. I think the old process was a little bit more restrictive because you had to do everything like kind of in one year, I think.
All at one time.
Yeah, and so now it's way more flexible. I mean, I bought a house during the process. Like I was doing lots of things outside of work, and like you said, I just kind of like didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just kind of was like, I'm doing it, and we'll just see what happens. But I did it over 3 years, and I kind of had to, because I had to wait for components to be released. But now everything's available, and you can look and see which components you want to do first, which ones fit within your own life, life, needs. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is looking at what's expected and then knowing there's flexibility with the process, and how does that fit into your life things outside of work, because it is like you have to set aside time to do it. And if there's too many things going on, then maybe then you need to like space it out, like where you do 2 components one year and you're taking the next year off and you do the other 2 the next year. I think just knowing what your own work style is. And so but that's part of the reflective piece. You have to reflect on your own working style. Like, I'm a mentor for teachers for this, but I can tell them what worked for me, but what worked for me may not jive with what works for them. I just can say, this is the things I did. I stayed organized. I think, like I said, you have to like have a calendar. You have to know that, okay, this weekend I can't because I'm going out of town or something, like it's just, you can do other things and pursue national board process. It's not, you have to push everything aside and just focus on national board. You can do other things. You can be a human. The process is designed by teachers for teachers. So we know that like life happens. We know, well, we didn't know that COVID was going to happen, but COVID happened, and like they pivoted and did lots of things that they needed to do to like still make sure that teachers could finish the process. So, we have teachers signing up to do the process now, knowing that this is all a weird year. I'm doing my maintenance this year. So, yeah.
I love how I know there are teachers who ask, is this the right time to do the national board? I'm like, it's the right time to do it, because when you look at and I pulled up like the 5 core propositions, like when you're talking about the students, talking about the subject you teach, responsible for student learning, the teachers are thinking about their practice, and teachers part of learning community. Those are 5 components we do every single day we step in that classroom. Mm-hmm. So why would you not go and start this whole process? You're already doing it.
Yeah, and you don't have to, I think some teachers feel like they have to be perfect to pursue national board, or like once they get it, they're like a perfect teacher. Like, I don't know what a perfect teacher is, because we're all learning right now. And you don't like national, I don't know. I don't feel like when you're doing your writing and like you talk about a lesson you did, if the lesson didn't go well, then you reflect on that. Doesn't have to be a cookie cutter, perfect, ideal lesson.
It's that reflection that makes you a better teacher.
Yeah, it's the reflective piece. And I think that I was doing a ton of that before I started national board, the process. I was constantly tweaking and thinking about my lesson and thinking about how I would do something different the next day or the next time I taught it. And I was, internally like making note of that or jotting it down in like a teaching journal. And so, even if someone's not going to pursue the process, like I think I try to tell teachers at my school, I said, you're doing a bunch of this stuff already. Like, you're meeting in PLCs, like professional learning communities. You're looking at your data. You're compiling student surveys. You're communicating with parents. Like, a lot of teachers realize that they're already doing a lot of this stuff anyway, because if they have an NBCT at some level of their district or their school leadership, then it's probably those people are probably driving some of that process too.
So our advice is to everybody who's listening to this National Board Champions podcast is to go out, step out on faith, step out there, and you do this process to be an NBCT, to be that great leader. And I'll say that I found this quote, and we can end on this quote. It says, "Great leaders don't set out to be a leader. They set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, it's always about the goal." And that is what being an effective teacher is when it comes to being a national board certified teacher. So be blessed, be safe, be wise, make great decisions, and we will see you at the next podcast.